applause for Pete Fidge. He's going to come and talk about Eurovision.
Bonjour, bienvenue, and willkommen to my talk on Eurovision. Right, I'm gonna. So you might think that I'm gonna talk about the costumes, about the ethnic ladies doing suggestive things with milk churns, about pianos that are on fire, men in hamster wheels. Or the Italian singer who appeared with a gorilla next to him. But I'm not really going to talk about all of that frivolous stuff. Some of you may have seen, I did a talk a few months ago on the joy of failure, and I talked about this next chap who, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just in case you missed that, this is Jan Tegan, who was the Norway's entry in 1978. And he did a song. It wasn't the best song you'll ever hear. It wasn't dreadful. He sang it all in tune, but he was the first ever person to get nil point. But what I loved about Jan's story is he then went back to Norway, and he kind of, he owned it. He owned his failure, and he just said, "Look, I believed in my song. I did the best I can, and it's just they didn't. The people of Europe voted. They didn't like it, and the people of Norway really took Jan Tegan to their heart, and they kind of really loved the fact that he kind of didn't go, but he didn't kind of try and blame everyone. He just kind of just went, I did it, but it wasn't good enough." And they really supported him, and they started buying his single, and they also got really pissed off with Europe, going, "How dare you tell us that our song is rubbish? How dare you say it's worth nil point?" So they started buying it, and it went up and up the charts, and it ended up being the number one single. In fact, it was number one for 5 weeks, and it ended up being in the top 10 for 18 weeks in the Norwegian charts. He brought out his album. He kind of then just owned being a loser. His album, This Year's Loser. He actually entered Eurovision again, and he didn't get nil point. But he's such a hero that if you were to go to his hometown, there's a statue of him. That's the level of it. But I'm not really here to talk about Eurovision. So. Now, how many people here watch Eurovision over the last 2 or 3 years? Hands up if you watch Eurovision. Hands up if you host a party when you're having Eurovision. Yep, I got a couple of there. So have some nibbles, have people round, lots of different countries. That's me. Hands up if you've ever written a song and entered it into Eurovision. Oh, that'll be me. Right. This is the song that I entered for Eurovision in 2008. Yeah, don't clap too loudly, because it didn't even get through the pre-selection. But hey, I've done it. I sent it off. I spoke to some producers at the BBC, but it didn't get through. Unfortunately, the song that got chosen instead of mine was by Andy Abrahams, and it finished 22nd. I'm not saying that mine would have done any better, but Andy Abrahams was the runner-up in the 2005 edition of X Factor. The UK's got a kind of tradition of kind of sending kind of people who have finished, second in X Factor from about 4 years previously. That's pretty high standard for the UK. Normally, it's someone who's finished kind of 5th or 6th. But I'm not really going to talk about. So I hope that I've kind of proved the fact that I really flippin' love Eurovision. So I speak hopefully with a degree of some authority over it. I remember when I was a kid, watching it. I remember listening, being told that it was too late and I had to go to bed, and then going up and surreptitiously listening to it on the radio I think it was in 1978, or 78, 79, when Israel won it. I definitely remember that. And then I kind of sort of fell out of love with Eurovision. I was like a cool indie kid, and Eurovision was really uncool. And then back in the 90s, I kind of sort of started really re-engaging with it and really loving it for its ridiculousness. But what I'm really going to talk to you today about is more about the politics and the controversy that goes behind Eurovision. So in 2022, you may remember that this was the Ukrainian orchestra, Kalush Orchestra, and they won it. There was kind of overwhelming that they wiped the board. UK were really unlucky because normally UK finishes last, and they had a really good entry with Sam, what's his name, which would have won in any other time, and it finished second. But everyone was kind of voted for Ukraine, and it was quite touching in some way that basically this wasn't the best song, but the whole of Europe came together because Ukraine had just been invaded just a few months before, and everyone sort of came together and just went, this is our way of showing that we stand for you. I'm sure Ukraine probably would have preferred missiles, tanks, and fighter planes, but votes was also a really good way, and it was people's way of voting, of showing political support. This had happened back in 2016. Jamala, again for Ukraine, won then, and her song 1944 was a song all about the forced deportation of Crimean Tatars by Joseph Stalin. Not you wouldn't think that's normally a great subject matter for a Eurovision pop song, but it kind of touched a nerve, and especially a lot of the Eastern European countries who were kind of sort of wary of Russia, and what had happened is Russia had invaded 2 years before, had annexed Crimea from the Ukraine, and so this was really a political song. Under Eurovision rules, you're not supposed to have a political song, and because it was about 1944, they kind of got away with saying, oh, it's not really about the situation, it's not about the fact you've just annexed Crimea 18 months ago, it's about what happened, what the Russians did in Crimea some 70 years ago. And so they kind of got away with it, much as ABBA were able to excuse the fact that Waterloo was all about the defeat of France. Again, using the whole history angle. Sometimes the songs that get entered are a little bit more obvious. So this was Armenia's entry. We don't want to put in, which could be, if you pronounce it slightly different, could be Putin, perhaps. This song actually they weren't allowed to put it in, literally, because Eurovision kind of went, we know what you're doing, and so unfortunately that song, it got disqualified some months before. But in Eurovision circles, it's much loved. This is in 2019. This was the Icelandic. Now they were a really hardcore industrial band into bondage, and in the green room, they got up a Palestine flag. So this is 2019. You know, there's lots of sort of talk in this year's Eurovision about sort of protests about Palestine, but it's been going on a while. They got fined for it. They claimed that the only reason that they entered Eurovision was so that they could do this protest. But it's not just political with a big P that Eurovision is also about. There's also kind of gender politics very much in play. It's traditionally, Eurovision has been very much a welcoming home for people from the LGBTQ community. This was Ukraine's entry in 2007, Ukraine again. This finished a very close second this is Israel's winning entry. This is Dana International, who won in 1998, who was the first transgender winner of Eurovision, and kind of it was really kind of breaking down barriers way before kind of other in other pop charts would be accepting of people from different kind of backgrounds. This was Eurovision gets shown obviously in Europe, but there's also a whole load of other, weirdly, there's a whole load of other countries who are part of the European Broadcasting Union who also take in Eurovision, and that includes a lot of Arab states and African states. What happened in a lot of the Arab states is that when they were screening it, and first of all, what they would do is they would screen Eurovision, but then whenever Israel were on, they would go to an advert break and just kind of pretend that Israel didn't exist. When Dana International won it, then what happened is then there was all the voting, and then it became rather clear, kind of as the voting was going on, that Israel were going to win. So they cut it and then announced that Belgium had won, who finished second. There's also Conchita Wurst from Germany, who won in 2014, and there's also this was the Finnish entry in 2012. The song was called "Marry Me," and it was a kind of up-tempo Euro number, sort of unremarkable in many ways. Apart from right at the end, she turned around and she kissed one of the bridesmaids. And it was the first same-sex kiss that there'd ever been on Eurovision. And Krista, who was the Finnish entry, she did it because it was a protest about Finnish same-sex marriage laws in Finland. You couldn't get married at that point in Finland, and that was her way of doing a protest. Again, this caused absolute outrage. China cut the feed, as did Turkey as well. And Turkey actually withdrew for a year or two because they thought that Eurovision was getting way too sordid, which if they saw the UK entry this year, heaven knows what they'll be doing next. There's always been in Eurovision, there's always been accusations of sort of block voting, and this is a rather I find this fascinating, but it's quite dull, really. This is basically just showing you all the countries that tend to. Someone's has done this special chart, just showing you over the last 20 years countries that have a strong affinity. So Cyprus and Greece and Albania all vote for each other, and then you've got all of the sort of Eastern European bloc. Ukraine and Russia used to kind of be friends. They used to, in Eurovision world anyway, they used to vote for each other. Then you've got Turkey, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, all kind of voting for each other. Belgium and the Netherlands, they're on their own, as are Ireland and the UK often vote for each other. Then you've got all the Scandinavian countries. It's kind of understandable to a certain degree because these countries have similar cultural backgrounds. So maybe some of these artists are kind of known within these kind of these areas. But there is also, for sure, there is tactical voting. And there have been lots of accusations of tactical voting. This was quite a famous one. This was 2003. This was the UK entry. And there had been the Iraq War, and UK had been at the forefront of pushing for it. Terry Wogan said the reason it's got nil points was because of tactical voting. Let's listen to the song. Musicians out there, but that's about half a tone out of tune, and the whole song just goes on. It doesn't get any better, because then it's the time for the bloke to start singing, and so maybe it wasn't tactical voting, maybe it just was really bad singing. Then, what I loved then was then Terry Wogan kind of said, then some people tapped him on the shoulder and went, oh no, it was really badly out of tune, Terry, it was really badly out of tune. And then they put forward the theory that the foldback, the playback to them had been deliberately tampered with so that they couldn't hear it. So lots of countries have struggled with this. Sometimes they go through, UK at this point. This was the start of the UK's really bad run, which would end. That was 2003, and that would end with me putting forward a song in 2008. Ireland had a strong tradition of winning Eurovision. They've won it, I think, the most number of times, tied with Sweden. Johnny Logan famously won twice for Ireland. They won it consecutive years. But then also, around about the same time, in the early 2000s, they went through a really bad patch, and they couldn't get out the semi-finals. They kept on getting knocked out. So much so that they decided in, I think it was in 2003, to put forward a puppet, which was a turkey called Dustin, and the song was called Irland 12 points, Ireland 12 points, which basically, and it was smacked of desperation, where it's like you've got a song just pleading with people to give you 12 points, and you've got a stuffed turkey. It was done by the same puppeteers who did Zig and Zag, if you remember Zig and Zag. They're not the only ones. This is Lithuania, who put forward the song "We Are the Winners of Eurovision." We are. It's worth watching. I haven't got the clip, but it's worth watching on YouTube, because this bald man then does some crazy hip hop breakdancing halfway through. They weren't the winners, although strangely they got to about 12, sixth, I think they finished. This was the postmodernist entry from Belgium in 1980. This band was called Telex. Telex were the Belgian Kraftwerk, if you will. And this song was called Eurovision, so it's very postmodern, and it was just about Eurovision, celebrating Eurovision.
Les frontières sont ouvertes, que déclarer si ce soir c'est la fête. Les vedettes sont inquiètes, elles se maquillent, fument une cigarette avant d'aller sur la scène. Eurovision, 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 Eurovision.
Anyway, so you get the idea. They finished. They wanted to finish last, but and they wanted to get nil points, so they claimed. That's what you say when you get 4 points. You said we wanted to get that. The reason why we entered was to get 0, but they got 4 points. There have been, apart from sort of accusations of kind of block voting, there have been other times, other controversies. This is Messiel's song. The song was called La 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 La. Back in this time, you had to sing a song in your own language, and then they sussed out that basically if you just said La 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 La, everybody kind of understands the word la la la. So she sang it 138 times, and doing so, she won Eurovision in 1968. But that was the Spanish entry. But it's recently come to light that it was a fix, and now someone's going to quickly shout out and help me out with this. The Spanish dictator Franco had apparently had bribed other juries to make it win, because it was felt that it was really important for Spain to be seen on the kind of international. It was to kind of Spain was a kind of a bit of a pariah in the late 60s when dictatorships weren't all the rage really in Europe. And so he kind of wanted Spain to win, so that everyone would have to come to Spain, and so that Spain could kind of be more immersed within the Eurovision culture. Now, if you watched this year's Eurovision, which was held in Sweden, United by Music, was a really behind the scenes was a really bad-tempered affair, probably more than any Eurovision that I can ever remember. There was the Dutch guy who got kicked out. There have been lots of accusations flying around by lots of the delegations. There was a really unpleasant atmosphere. Now the Israeli entry, Ellen Goren, she originally the song was called October Rain, which was it got banned by the EBU because it was seen to be being about the recent the atrocity in Israel, the massacre of 1600, and so they had to change. They were told that they had to change the lyrics, or they had to change the song. And Israel, at first, they said they weren't going to do it. They were going to try and stand firm. And then it was clear that the EBU were going to kick them out. And at that point, the government actually stepped in and told the Israeli broadcaster basically to change the lyrics, to put it in, because it was seen as really important. The Israeli government saw it as really important that Israel would not kind of ostracized. Russia, since the invasion of Ukraine, has been kicked out of EBU, and Israel was really wary of being kind of a pariah and not being part of it. They kind of want to be part of this cultural conversation. So it was so important that the songwriters were outraged that they had to change it, but the government kind of stepped in and made them change the lyrics. The Israeli song was okay, nothing amazing. Didn't do that great in the. This is right, really sad statistics. There's the way that Eurovision is marked these days. There's a jury. Every country has a jury of industry experts who vote for it, and then also the public are invited to vote for it in each country. And so there's, first of all, there's the marks from the juries, and then there's the marks from all of the people voting all around Europe. And this is all the jury points. So Switzerland got 22 of the 37 countries put Switzerland as gave it 12 points. None of them gave Israel. And yet, the interesting thing is, when it got to the televoting, 15 countries, more than any, only one country, the televote was Switzerland, giving them 12 points. 15 countries gave Israel. And that is really interesting. Outside of Eurovision, that tells me, now I don't know for sure, maybe it's just loads of people really like that song, or maybe people were voting because they have a empathy with Israel. I didn't think it was going to work that way. I thought there was going to be no one voting for Israel. But what's interesting from that statistic, that tells me that the people of Europe are actually maybe more supportive of Israel than I thought. And sorry, I know this is going quite heavy. You thought we thought I was here to talk about Eurovision. I'm talking about people's supporting of Israel or not. And the other interesting thing to note is that if you look at all the countries who have voted first for Israel, Australia, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany. It's all Central and Western Europe. Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, UK, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, San Marino, rest of the world, Portugal. And then all of the more Eastern Bloc countries, Albania, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Slovenia, Poland, Moldova, Lithuania, Georgia, Estonia, Czech Republic, Latvia, Armenia, Croatia, Ukraine. None of those put Israel at the top. So it's very interesting when you look at this, that kind of just if you start to delve into what is just people voting for a fun or stupid song or whatever, that starts to tell me something else. I'm not, and I was really quite surprised when I saw that. It's always been a world of controversy. This year, the bloke from Netherlands got kicked out, I think, due to an altercation with a camera woman, and that's never happened before. No one's ever been kicked out. But the Iceland entry in 2006, she came really close to getting kicked out. She was a comedian who had a sort of Ali G type persona program on Iceland TV. She entered Eurovision in character, and no one kind of realized that this person was doing it in character, and she was just ridiculously obnoxious. And when I say ridiculously obnoxious, she called the Dutch entry a slag. Then she accused the Swedish entry during an interview. She said that the only reason that she had got through to the through to the final was that she had slept with the head of the EBU, and when somebody said, "Really?" and she said, "Yes, no, I saw them in a car outside the front of the hotel yesterday." When she went for her semi-final, and not only did the audience boo, but all the other contestants apparently got onto the side of the stage, were booing her as well. So I'm wary that I'm running out of time. There's you can't talk about Eurovision without showing a picture of ABBA. Interesting fact, number 10, is that when ABBA won Eurovision over in Brighton in 1974, there was tactical voting going on there, and the UK gave it nil point, in part because they realised that Sweden was going to be sort of hot opposition, and they wanted Olivia Newton-John, who was the UK's entry, to win, so they gave it nil point. And if I was to ask you which record that from Eurovision has sold the most copies, which do you think it is? Italy's 1958 entry, Volare, which then got taken over by Dean Martin. Finishing, not doing that great in Eurovision isn't necessarily the end of the world. This is Armenia's entry from 3 years ago. It finished 20th, but it's got over 1 billion streams on Spotify. So yeah, it just shows you that not coming last. Had to say my song that I entered in 2008. Yeah, slightly fewer. Okay, we're in the final straight. In 1974, Sweden won with ABBA, Eurovision Song Contest. What always happens is that the country who win then get to host the following year. So the Eurovision Song Contest was held in Sweden the following year. But what happened was Sweden isn't a massive country, and they had to pay for it all, and it totally sucked all of the money that would sort of go towards other cultural events, and a lot of artists were really pissed off with this, and so they ended up doing a mass protest, like there were marches, and this has made the 90 defining moments in Swedish history. It's when there was a march against Eurovision. There are reports, which I find hard to believe, but it says on the internet, so it must be true, that there were 200,000 people who marched on against Eurovision. They held an alternative Eurovision song contest of outlandish bands, which was shown on a rival TV show, which got almost as many people watching as Eurovision. And the Swedish authorities got so scared by this that the following year, 1976, they didn't put in an entry because there had been such sort of hatred against Eurovision. And I'll end on this little story. This is the Portuguese entry, also from 1974. It finished last, but the remarkable thing about this otherwise unremarkable song is that it started a revolution. Portugal was also under dictatorship, and in about a month after Eurovision had happened, there were plans afoot for a revolution, and the cue for the revolution was when this song got played on the radio. And so when this song got played on the radio, a whole crowd of people that knew this was the cue to go to a certain square, and that's where the revolution started. It was called the Carnation Revolution. It was a very peaceful revolution, and within a few days, the dictatorship had been toppled, and so all through a song of Eurovision. So next time you think that Eurovision is just about hamster wheels and men in gorilla suits and exploding pianos, think again, because it's deeper than that.